Hello creatives and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to create an animated short from a vector illustration. So we will start with an illustration. Mine will be of happy pumpkins and leaves turning into creepy ones. Ooh. Yours can be whatever you like, whatever you have created. First we are going to start by opening the program, Adobe Animate, just the one I chose. And then we are going to choose New from the File menu, and it's going to be an HD video for the size of 1280 by 720. Once you press OK, you will then see an artboard, or a stage as it is called in this program. You will see a timeline at the very top, and then you will also see tools lining the top and right of the program. So let's go ahead and pull our vector illustration into the program and onto the stage. To do this, you will go to File at the top, click Import, and then click Import to Stage. Or you can do what I did and choose the keyboard shortcut Control+I, or you can press Command+I if you are on a Mac, because I currently use a Windows computer. You can then make sure all of your layers are selected in the pop-up window. I know it didn't show it here, but you will then go to the bottom of that pop-up window, choose Select Stage Size to the same as Illustrator Artboard, and also make sure the box is checked next to Place Objects at Original Position, and everything will appear up on the stage right in the center. Because everything needs to then be in layers so you can see everything and work with everything, you will then go up to the top to Modify, go down to Timeline, and choose Distribute to Layers, or that keyboard shortcut again, Control-Shift-D. Keyboard shortcuts make things go a lot faster. So every asset will now appear on its own layer, and now we'll name the layers by double-clicking the name of each layer and renaming it. Make sure they are descriptive. Each asset in a layer is defaulted to layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, etc. Making it descriptive is much easier so you know what's on what layer. Keep things organized, and it also helps you know which layer has what asset so you don't lose your place when you have a multi-layered illustration. It spares aggravation, really, and it can take up a chunk of time to name all the layers, so I know I've sped it up here, but expect it to take an hour depending on how complex your illustration is that you want to animate. Once all the layers are named, the assets then need to be made into symbols for them to be animated or moved. So select the layer that you will want to start with, and then you're going to go up to Modify, Convert to Symbol, and then choose Graphic from the Symbol drop-down menu on the pop-up menu that will appear. Or you can set a keyboard shortcut to do this for you. I've set mine to F8 on the keyboard just to make the process go by faster. So at this stage, it's easier to apply tweens at the same time that you do this. Typically, the symbol names I like to keep to the same name as the layer name, again, so that you don't get lost. It just makes it a lot easier to find later. Now that we're going to apply a tween actually allows you to move an object or move a shape or whatever you had illustrated within Adobe Animate. So you're going to go up to Insert and then just click Motion Tween, or Shift M, or whatever keyboard shortcut you want to provide for that. Or if you're not going to have something move completely, you can then choose Insert and choose Classic Tween, or Shift C, or whatever keyboard shortcut you want to use for that. I typically keep Classic Tweens only for the background, typically because backgrounds typically don't move, but it's up to you. Motion tweens, if you want to keep everything uniform, is fine. So to make your own shortcuts, since I've been talking about keyboard shortcuts a lot, you just go up to Edit, and then there's an option, Edit Shortcuts, and then you can apply whatever shortcuts you like with whatever makes it easier for your fingers to use. While doing all of this, you need to make sure you keep your layers in order by clicking and dragging them into place, like I've shown here. And now that everything is labeled, made into symbols, and have tweens applied, then you're going to make the symbols move. My animation is only 6 seconds long. When you started the program and you've chosen the HD video, it automatically defaults to 24 frames per second, because that's the standard. And since mine's 6 seconds long, you can work out mathematically how long or how many frames that takes up. But I just chose 6 seconds because this is just going to be a really, really short animated short for Instagram, basically. So this short is separated into 2 parts, I decided, because I'm switching the images in the middle. So part 1 is going to be the happy pumpkins, and then part 2 is going to be the creepy ones, as I said in the beginning. So, when tweens are first applied, they only take up the first second or the 24 frames of the timeline. It's by default from the program. In order to extend the tween like I have done, you are going to hover over the end and click and drag with the mouse to the desired time length. I say time length because sometimes it's easier to see the time slots than it is to pay attention to what frame number you are on. With this, I ended up choosing 3 seconds or 72 frames if you prefer to work in frames. Do this for each tween for your short, depending on what you used in your illustration and what you want to move. The second half of the illustration that I'm using, I'm then going to have it switch back and forth between the 2 images. So mine's going to start at just before 3 seconds because I have to have time for that switch. So, to move a tween across the timeline, because I am going to be switching back and forth between those 2 images, I need to move my tweens for the latter, everything that's in the latter half of the animated short, over down the timeline so you don't see it. To do this, you're going to click on one end, like you did previously to extend the tween, but instead of extending it, you're going to wait for it to highlight in blue, which is the default. It'll highlight in blue. You will then click and drag with the mouse the left end of the tween until it is positioned at the right start time. Essentially, what you're doing is you're clicking to make sure it gets highlighted, and then you're just clicking the whole thing and dragging it across the timeline to the right time slot. And for me, it's right before 3 seconds. I think it's, like 66 frames or something? Now extend the tweens to the correct length as before, like I showed before here, just to make sure that it ends at the correct time that you want the short to end. For me, that will be 6 seconds. Now, time to move our symbols. This is kind of the fun part. So, you've done a lot, you've organized everything, you've got all your tweens right in the right position, and now you can then move things. So, anytime a symbol is moved, it creates a keyframe. A keyframe is signified by like a little star, a little dot, and it appears up on the timeline. First, you want to make sure that the playhead, which is the red needle on the timeline that moves back and forth, you're going to make sure that that is placed at the start time when you want to start moving any object or any part of your illustration. It's important that you do that, so that way you don't unnecessarily move something at the wrong time. So you're going to click and drag the playhead, or you can just click at the time slots and then it'll just move there. And before moving anything, I like to lock all the other layers by clicking the dot next to the layer name under the padlock symbol on each layer, and a little padlock symbol will appear so you know that it is locked. This just helps to prevent choosing the wrong thing or accidentally moving something that you don't want to move, or of course accidentally choosing the background, which I tend to do. So let's move the symbols. Beginning at the start time, I did select the leaves. I started there, and I set them in their start positions at the top right where they will begin off stage. Whatever you are moving, make sure you start at their start position with the playhead starting at the start time. What I tend to do is to make the full motion of the items that I'm moving, and then I go back and I put in all the details to make it look believable. So that's what we're doing. So I put the playhead at the start time, I put the leaves at their start position at the top right off the stage because they're just going to float into the stage and off the stage. And then I put the playhead at the finish time, which is 3 seconds, and I moved the leaves by selecting them all with the mouse at once, and then I move them down by clicking and dragging with the mouse down to the bottom left and off the stage. So that way it gets the entire motion right away, and then I can go back and put in all the detailing later. Now that you have moved what you are moving on the stage, you can then move the playhead from your finish time back to your start time. Mine's from 3 seconds to 0. And then when you press the play button at the top, it will show the movement that you just put in. So mine is going to have the leaves floating down diagonally across the stage. I do the same process for the creepy leaves as well, putting them at the same start position as the happy leaves, and then moving them to the same end position as the happy leaves because they're going to switch, but they will be in the same positions when they do. Now the overall movement is in place. We can go back and modify the movement with a lot of detailing so it's not so stark and stiff. During the leaves' journey across the stage, I pause the playhead at regular intervals. You can decide whatever intervals you need. Move the leaves up or down with the selection tool and transform them or rotate them so that they don't look like they're just solid objects going diagonally down. They actually move back and forth or up and down. This makes the movement more believable, and each time I move the leaves, a keyframe pops up on the timeline as you see there, and it shows the change with that keyframe for position. For the second half of the short, starting between 2 and 3 seconds, I placed the playhead at about 60 frames and positioned the creepy leaves to where they would match up with the happy leaves, and then we are going to make this switch. This process does take up quite a bit of time. Of course, whenever you're putting in detail, it's going to take time. So switching back and forth between the two different types of leaves, it's a little bit of a game to guess where the switch needs to happen and how fast. So I make sure that everything lines up, and I apply similar detailed movements for the second half of the short with the creepy leaves, because again, you don't want them to be stark, solid objects just floating down the screen. So in order to create the switch between the happy leaves and the creepy dark leaves, I start at the place where the playhead needs to create the first switch, and then I right-click on that single frame in the tween in the pop-up window. When you right-click, a pop-up window comes up, and then you click Cut Frame, and it literally cuts the frame, it breaks it. Then what I do is I take the tween that has now turned from yellow to gray, showcasing that there is nothing there, and I click and drag the tween to move it over a few frames to allow the switch to happen. And then you can see that right there. So I repeat this process over and over and over again with each single leaf. That's why the whole process seems to take up quite a bit of time. Again, it'll probably take up about an hour, but I've sped it up here for you just for the sake of this video. There really isn't any shortcuts for this process that I have found, unless there is a possibility to make a shortcut for cut frames. I haven't put a keyboard shortcut in, so I always just right-click exactly where I need it to be. Once this whole process is finished, you will get to see here how the leaves come from the top right off stage, down across the stage, and as soon as it hits about 3 seconds, it switches back and forth a few times, and then you see the creepy leaves and the creepy image of the pumpkins pop up, and that continues until the leaves move diagonally down to the left off stage, and that is the whole process of the switch. Now, for the background and the pumpkins, you will also need to do the same process as the leaves, switching them back and forth by cutting the frames in the same time slots as the leaves. Now the last thing to do is to animate the specks across the stage, because I decided to have like little specks of dust floating around because leaves and dust seem to kick up at the same time. So the first half of the short, I decided to have the specks twinkling by turning them on and off with that same cut frame process. But this time I chose faster intervals than I did with the background, the pumpkins, and the leaves. I only cut it across 2 or 3 frames. So every 2 to 3 frames, the speck will be there, and then it'll be gone, and then it'll be there, and then it'll be gone. I repeat the process for every speck of dust. But for the latter half of the short, I decided to make the specks kind of like float very slowly in a zigzag pattern to kind of give it that creepy vibe, you know? So instead of cutting the frames and making them go like switch on and off, I positioned the playhead. I chose one of the dust particles, the specks, the creepy one, and I moved it in a zigzag pattern every 5 to 10 frames. I moved it in kind of like a 3-step process or a 4-step process, if you will, so that it looks like it's slowly floating. And then I played the playhead back so that I can see how fast it's actually going. I went ahead and repeated this process for every single speck. Again, this is going to take up a big chunk of time, probably about an hour or 2. So it is going to require a lot of patience. Animation is a lengthy process. It's not so quick as it is here in this video. But that is how I created an animated short in Adobe Animate. I hope you guys enjoyed learning this, or if you haven't animated before and this is your first time, hopefully you learned a few things. I taught myself this program, so if I can do it, I have full confidence that you guys can do it too. It's very similar to all the rest of the Adobe programs, it's just some of the tools are a little bit different, and there's a little bit of a learning curve. But definitely utilizing the playhead, the cut frames, the mouse, and keyframes and tweens are pretty vital for this program. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up so that I know that you liked it, and I really do appreciate it. Go ahead and subscribe and click that notification bell so that you can be notified to whenever I upload new videos and tutorials, which there will be quite a few coming in this month of December. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon, creatives.